Hey guys, this is Blue Eyes Master 91, and today I thought I would do a Ice Barriers deck profile, so let's dive on in. Alright, so for the Ice Barriers deck, we need 3 copies of Revealer. Revealer, while you control another Ice Barrier monster, your opponent is unable to tribute monsters, and then you can also use the following effects. Once a turn, you can discard a card, special summon an Ice Barrier tuner from your deck. Also, you cannot special summon for the rest of the turn except water monsters. Not really a big issue in this deck. If you would discard or send a card or cards from your hand to the graveyard to activate an Ice Barrier monster's effect, you can banish this card from the graveyard instead. So she's a searcher for a tuner to go into your synchro plays right off the bat, as well as a way to not only lock your opponents out of high level monsters, but you're able to use her as a discarding effect by banishing her. She's really, really useful. Next, we have 3 copies of Speaker. Speaker says, while you control another Ice Barrier, you can special summon this card. I'm getting ahead of myself here. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, defense position monster your opponent controls cannot change their battle positions. You can only use each of the following once a turn. If you control another Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. If you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon Ice Barrier tokens. 1 Ice Barrier token, level 1, attack 0, defense 0. She's really useful because she locks your opponents. If their monsters happen to be in defense, they're locked into defense. And then the fact that she can special summon herself out and then banish herself to give you 1 token is really, really nice, and it's useful for synchro plays. Next, I run 3 copies of Hexa, Spirit of the Ice Barrier. Most decks only run him at 2, some do 3. While you control an Ice Barrier monster, another Ice Barrier monster, your monsters your opponent controls lose 500 attack and defense. During your main phase, you can send a level 3 or lower Ice Barrier monster from your deck to your graveyard. And if you do, this card's level becomes the same as that monster's. Until the end of this turn, you can only use this effect once per turn. So he's able to modify his own level, as well as weakening your opponent's monster. So that's another really, really good card. This deck is based on a very, very big control base, so it's nice to see a lot of the cards really do help on that. Next, I run 2 copies of Defender again. Most decks will probably only run him at 1, but while you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters your opponent controls cannot declare an attack if their attack is greater than or equal to this card's defense. So he is extremely useful in locking your opponents into not being able to do anything for a while. He makes it so your opponents cannot attack if they have more attack than 1600. So it's really, really good just to kind of stall out your opponents at the start of the game or later in the game if they get over or counter a lot of your other plays. Next, we have 2 copies of Prior. If you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. If you do this, though, you cannot special summon anything level 5 or higher for the rest of the turn. I do not use his first effect just because he makes it so you cannot go into your synchro plays. His second effect is much better anyway. You can tribute this card, target 1 Ice Barrier monster in your graveyard, except Prior, special summon it. So you send him away to the graveyard, and then you can re-summon out any of your other Ice Barrier monsters. But the special summoning effect, making it so you cannot summon up level 5 or higher special summon level 5 or higher monsters for the turn, I don't like. It's not a good effect. And it slows down this deck a lot. Next, we have a single copy of Zujin of the Ice Barrier. You can tribute this card, special summon a level 5 or higher Ice Barrier monster from your hand. If this card is in your graveyard, except the turn it was sent there, you can target a level 3 or higher water monster you control, reduce its level by exactly 2, and if you do, special summon this card but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use each of these effects once a turn. So he's really good in getting out high level monsters and then modifying your levels for synchro plays. I really do love that. I really do love using him. Next, I run a single copy of General Wayne. His effect is spell and traps sent from the field to your opponent's graveyard are banished instead. You can only use each of the following effects of General Wayne once a turn. If your opponent controls a monster and you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add a Ice Barrier spell or trap from your deck to your hand. So he makes it so your opponent loses the spell and traps they might need in the graveyard by forcing them to be banished, as well as he's able to be special summoned and he gives you a free search regardless on if he is normal or special summoned. It's extremely useful. Next, we have a single copy of Judge of the Ice Barrier. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, each time your opponent activates a card effect by paying life points, they lose 500 additional life points. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. You can target 1 or 2 Ice Barrier monsters in your graveyard and 1 or 2 cards in your opponent's graveyard. Shuffle them into the deck, and if you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard. Then target 1 attack position monster on the field, change it to defense. So she is a recycler. She is able to burn your opponent when they use card effects that force them to pay life points. They lose an additional 500 regardless. And then she's able to force an opponent's monster that may not have any defense into defense. So she's extremely useful. Next we have Strategist of the Ice Barrier, who once a turn by discarding a card in your hand, by sending an Ice Barrier monster from your hand to the graveyard, you can draw 1 card. So with Revealer's effect, you just banish her to use his effect. Which is kind of nice and saves you from having to discard stuff that you like or might need. Next we have the final Ice Barrier monster card, Spellbreaker of the Ice Barrier. Once per turn, you can send an Ice Barrier monster from your hand to the graveyard. Neither player can activate spell cards until the end of your next turn, while this card is face up on the field. So she freezes out your spell cards on both sides for you and your opponent, which is kind of nice if you don't really need to use them, but your opponent might. Say they're running an Xyz deck and they need a rank up. She blocks them from being able to use it for a turn. So the monsters that are not part of the engine but run really, really well in the deck, we have a single copy of Daedalus, the Atlantean Prince. You can send another Atlantean monster from your deck to the graveyard, except this card. Add an Atlantean card from your deck to your hand, except this card. This card is sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect. Target an Atlantean monster in your graveyard, except this card. Special summon it. You can only use each of these effects once per turn. So he's really useful in sending and adding these guys to your hand, which is the Atlantean Dragoons. All face up, level 3 or lower sea serpent type monsters you control can attack your opponent's life points directly. When this card is sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, add a sea serpent type monster from your deck to your hand, except this card. So he's very when you use Daedalus to send one of these guys to the graveyard, their effects do go off. So then you can add this guy to your hand, your Ocean Dragon Lord Neo Daedalus. I have him in the deck because he is a phenomenal main deck boss monster. When you summon him out and you have Yumi, Legendary Ocean, anything that counts as Yumi on the field, you can use his effect. You can send Yumi on your side of the field to the graveyard to send all cards in both players' hands and on the field to the graveyard except this card. So basically, he sets up a 2900 direct attack. Next, we have Lepus Dragon. With Atlantean Dragoons, you can also add him to your hand, and then his effect would go off when he's added from the deck or from your graveyard to your hand. You special summon him. He is a level 5 tuner monster with 2600 defense. So he's extremely useful and very, very beefy. Unfortunately, he has no attack points. Next, we have a copy of Gamma Seal for just kaiju plays. We have 3 copies of Sea Diva, Deep Sea Diva. When this card is normal summon, you can special summon one level 3 or lower Sea Serpent monster from your deck. So she allows you to go into him, which allows you to do this, which allows you to go into either of these guys. So extremely useful combo. Next, we have 2 copies of Barrier Statue of the Torrent. So this just makes it so neither player can special summon anything but water monsters, which is not a problem in this deck because everything you have except one card is a water monster, and it is the only hand trap we run in Effect Veiler. So that is it on the monsters. Let's dive into the spell cards. So for the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Winds Over the Ice Barrier. Tribute any number of Ice Barrier monsters to special summon from your deck that many level 4 or lower Ice Barrier monsters with different names from each other. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard to target your Ice Barrier monsters an Ice Barrier monster that is banished. Add it to your hand. You can only use each of these effects once per turn. So this allows you to reset your board and special summon out different stuff, as well as retrieving banished stuff. So it's really, really useful. Next, we have 3 copies of Medallion of the Ice Barrier, which is just your generic spell search. We have 2 copies of Freezing Chains of the Ice Barrier. When this card is activated, you can target a level 4 or lower Ice Barrier monster in the graveyard, special summon it. While you control 3 or more Ice Barrier monsters, monsters you control are unaffected by the activated effects of your opponent's monsters that were special summoned from the extra deck. You can only activate 1 Freezing Chain of the Ice Barrier per turn, so it's really useful in protection as well as a special summon. But if you activate it and you lose everything on your field, it can become just a kind of something that sits in your spell and trap card zone for a while. Next, we have a copy of Foolish to send stuff to the grave. We have a copy of Feather Duster to get rid of back row, and we have our Raigeki for board wiping. Next, we have Terraforming to search out our copy of Legendary Ocean. This card becomes treated as Yumi, and all water monsters in both players' hands and on the field decrease the level by 1, and the attack of all water monsters increased by 200, so it's really, really useful in synchro plays. We have our copy of Monster Reborn, and then just because there's only one, we have 1 trap card in the deck, Ice Dragon's Prison. So target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon it to your field, but its effects are negated, then you can banish 1 monster from both players' fields that have the same type as each other. So type as in dragon, spellcaster, anything like that, not just dragons. You can do any type, but there's got to be at least 1 on both sides of the field. If you don't have one, I don't think it really matters that much, but your opponent would be the one person you'd want to have them. That is it for the main deck. Let's dive into our extra deck. So we have a single copy of Trish Zero. This is the new boss monster of the deck. When this card is Synchro Summon, you can banish up to 3 cards from your 3 cards your opponent controls. If this Synchro Summon card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card, You can special summon the original Trishula Ice Dragon of the barrier from your extra deck or graveyard, and its attack power becomes 3,300. Then you have the attack of any and all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls. Also negate their effects. So he's really useful in getting out your copy of Trish and then increasing its attack strength. And because this deck came out during COVID, I'm not honestly sure if Trish's effect would activate, which is when this card is Synchro Summoned, you can banish up to one card from your opponent's hand, field, and graveyard. The card in the hand is chosen at random. I don't believe it would be because it's not counted as a Synchro Summon. It's, I believe, counted as a special summon. Yeah. So I would need a judge to quickly rule on that, but I believe it does not go off. But yeah, so next we have a copy of our Tiger King. Tiger King is able to target any number of face-up cards you control and return them to your hand. And if you do, this card gains 500 attack for each of the cards sent back to the hand. So he can become a very, very beefy tiger very quickly. Next we have Brionic Dragon of the Ice Barrier. You can discard any number of cards to the graveyard, then target that same number of cards your opponent controls. Return those cards to their hand. You can only use the effect once a turn. Then we have Gungnir of the Ice Barrier. Once per turn, you can discard 2 cards to the graveyard, up to 2 cards to the graveyard, then target the same number of cards your opponent controls and destroy them. So, board wipe, board reshuffle, so to speak. Then we have our 2 Excel Synchro monsters, which are Synchro Tuners, which is Shooting Riser, and Excel Synchron, which both can modify their levels. This card is Synchro Summon. You can send 1 card from the deck to the graveyard whose level is lower than this card's on the field, and if you do reduce this card's level by that monster, but for the rest of the turn, you can activate card. You can activate the effects of monsters with the same name. You can only use each of the effects once per turn, and then the second effect is once per chain during your opponent's main phase. You can quick effect immediately after this effect resolves, Synchro Summon using cards you control. So, I believe they both basically have that same effect, yeah. With Excel Synchron, it is you can send a Synchron monster from deck to grave, then activate one of the effects, which we don't have any Synchron monsters in our deck, so he's not really able to modify his level, but Shooting Riser can. Then we have a copy of Abyss Dweller, rank 4. Well, while this card has material attached that was originally a water, all water monsters gain 500 attack. Once per turn, you can detach 1 material from this card. Your opponent cannot activate cards in their graveyard, so he negates grave effects and gives monsters 500 attack. Then we have number 101, Silent Honor Arc. You can detach 2 materials from this card, then target 1 special summon monster your opponent controls in attack position. Attach it to this card. As material can only use its effect once per turn. If this card is face up on the field, this face up card on the field would be destroyed by battle or card effect. You can detach 1 material instead, so he is a way to save himself. Next we have a copy of Borload. For just a 3k beater, we have our Needle Fiber, who allows you to go into either of the 2 Synchro Tuner monsters, and you need a Tuner monster to link summon him. He also allows you to special summon a level 3 or lower Tuner monster from the hand or deck. And defense, its effects are, of course, cannot be activated that turn, and then during your opponent's main phase or battle phase, you can banish this card you control to special summon 1 Synchro Tuner monster from your extra deck. So, he's really useful in getting these 2 out without having to actually Synchro Summon them naturally. We have a copy of Mista Starboy, because he just gives water monsters attack power boosts and lowers the attack of fire monsters. Water monsters on the field gain 500 attack and defense. Fire monsters lose 400 attack and defense. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, target a water monster in the graveyard, add it to your hand. So he allows you to re-add from grave, and then we have a copy of Erica, the Water Charmer. Similarly to the running theme, I feel like, in this deck, she allows you to target a water monster in your opponent's graveyard to special summon it. This card, shows zone this card points to. This card is Link Summon. This Link Summon card is destroyed by battle or destroyed by an opponent's card effect. While in its owner's monster zone, you can add a water monster with 1500 or less defense, from deck to hand, and you can only use its effect once per turn. So she allows you to search out and add some to your hand. So that is it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.